Comadres, welcome to another episode of Comadreando podcast. I'm your host, Marcy, and today we have an amazing guest. Her name's Elizabeth, and I'm going to let her introduce herself.
Hi, my name's Elizabeth. I am a board-certified behavior analyst and also have a history of working with individuals with disabilities in other settings. I was formerly a special education teacher, and I'll kind of go into my background more, I think, as we discuss. I also created the feeding assessment tool, and I'm trying to spread the word about that and any ways that I can support other families and practitioners with feeding therapy.
Awesome. All right, Comadres. So today we have an amazing episode. We are going to be talking about picky eating and aversive eating habits in children with special needs. And as a mom of a child with special needs and special education teacher, I've seen both sides of the spectrum. So I feel like we've never talked about this topic before. So I feel like it's a good time to, cover it because I know a lot of you have reached out to me regarding how to introduce new foods to your child. So I feel like Elizabeth would be an amazing guest to give us tips, and not only that, but then dive more into what got her interested in feeding particularly. What was I gonna say? Okay, so before we get into that, what made you decide to work with children and specifically children with special needs?
So I have always just felt called to this population, beginning even in high school. My first experience was volunteering at a summer camp for not just kids, but kids and adults with disabilities. I just always felt like that was the right path for me to take. I'm a woman of faith, so I have always just felt like God was calling me to do that. Ever since then, I've just kind of pursued every opportunity, which has given me like a vast array of experiences with this population. So I worked with music therapy, dance lessons. I did residential care. I've done work with nonprofit organizations. I worked on a project to integrate young adults with disabilities into like a college setting. So just like a wide array of experiences that I've just jumped on just because I felt like, again, this was something that I was good at and kind of meant to do.
That's amazing. So tell me about that first initial job experience working with kids with special needs in the summer camp. What was that like for you? Or had you, like, before that time, had you had experience working with children with special needs before you started that summer camp program?
No, definitely not. I come from a really small town, and so it was just not very diverse, including, with different disabilities. There was maybe a few children that received special education services, but, um, nothing that was really provided me a good introduction to this population. And so then I just happened to go to the summer camp where we worked. We were taken by bus to a different camp and volunteered with kids and adults and just the fun activities. We did face painting and games and all kinds of stuff. And it was just so eye-opening because they were enjoying it so much. I was enjoying it so much. And I felt like completely connected to these people that I was so different from. And from there on, I was like, yes,
That's awesome. So you started as a teacher, then you specialized in special education. So once you became a teacher, then you specialized in special education. What inspired you to become a BCBA specifically?
Yeah, so originally I had started studying social work and then decided that I wanted to switch to special education just because I wanted that guarantee that I was going to work with this population. And in social work, I wasn't sure if I would be able to or not. And so then right out of undergrad, I ended up getting an offer for being a general education teacher, which I accepted, but I was like, I don't know if this is for me. And after 1 year, I was like, no way, I want to do special education. So I then taught special education, and I had taken one class. That's all in my undergrad related to like classroom management and behavior analysis. And I always liked the principles that I learned from that class, thought they were really, really useful, was always like calling on the information from that class. And so then I eventually decided to go back for my master's. And so now I have my master's in applied behavior analysis. And so currently I'm the clinical director over an ABA organization that delivers services to just kids with autism in clinic, school, community, and home settings.
ABA has been somewhat of a controversial topic amongst people that are on the spectrum, how do you feel about the criticisms around the ABA? Because I actually saw a post by a company that does BCBA, and they were saying that there's a bunch of myths out there regarding ABA, and to give good services, it doesn't mean that you have to be on the spectrum yourself. So what would be your argument for or against? Well, not against, but like what would be your argument for giving people with autism services for ABA therapy?
Yes, everything you said is completely true, and I hear about it quite often. I think there's just a lot of misconceptions, or as you said, myths surrounding ABA. ABA is a really young field, so that's something that's really important to keep in mind because a lot of these things happened only maybe like in the 50s. So that's not really like that long ago that maybe some of these controversial uses of the science occurred. Whereas if you look at like other related fields that have been around a lot longer, they might also have some concerning backgrounds, but they happened a long, long time ago and they're not quite as relevant today. But ABA has grown a lot since it was established in the 60s. In 1998, the regulatory board, the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, came to be. And since then, we have incredibly strict regulations that we have to abide by. We have a very, very comprehensive and strict ethics code. And any violation of that ethics code could result in either additional training all the way up to losing your license or legal action. Obviously, there could be a BCBA out there who's not abiding by it, or maybe you have a negative experience with a BCBA, but the same could be said for any practitioner across any field. So if you're really just looking at the field of ABA, a lot of people think like it's just really cold or you're just dangling rewards in front of people. No, so much of it, the bulk of it is parent training, preventing problem behaviors, skill acquisition, so teaching children and adults things that they might not be able to do yet. So many things. I always say, if you look at your life, I can tell you so many things in ABA that you're using already. People just don't realize that that's actually ABA.
It's so funny because I get this a lot, and when I started becoming a special education teacher, I was in a school that had applied ABA principles to the way that we taught the students. So we would look at the students and come up with a plan on how to instruct them, right, and how to really get that child to acquire that skill. I feel like special education has changed, though, like you were saying, from getting goals to have them be more like your neurotypical peers, or like making them feel less than because they're having neurodiverse behaviors, to reinforcing and like, you know, in neuro affirming, right? Neuro affirming practices where the students feel more capable of being themselves. I feel like there's always like a tightrope where we walk as practitioners and as providers of services when we're dabbling in the special education arena. But yeah, no, I feel like it's definitely exactly what you said. I feel like it's a new area, right? Until my son started ABA therapy when he was 2, I honestly had never heard of a BCBA. I didn't know what that was. And then after that, it was funny because like once you learn what it is, you like meet more people, I guess, or you're more aware, which like for me, yeah, like my one of my mentors in District 75, because I used to work in District 75 here in New York City. So one of my mentors, actually, Cassie, she was a BCBA, and she was actually a college professor that was like giving online classes, I think for the University of Phoenix, if I believe that's correct. But yeah, like I saw different ways that she was using ABA specifically to affirm the students and also like teach them coping behaviors that were like more acceptable for society, if that makes any sense, but not like making them feel bad about being themselves and you know their neurodiversity.
Absolutely, yeah. It's definitely not about taking the autism out of somebody or, you know, making them not be who they are. Yeah, that's definitely not our goal whatsoever. We always talk about what is a problem behavior, and when can we actually ethically intervene on a behavior. If it's just that we don't like it, or the parent doesn't like it, or the teacher doesn't like it, we don't touch it, because it actually has to be, impeding their ability to make significant social connections, impeding their ability to learn, physically dangerous, any of those sorts of things for us to say, okay, ethically we can intervene because it's going to benefit this child in the long run. It's not just a preference.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, my son actually is restarting ABA because in New York City, once they start school age, they take it away. They're like, oh no, we don't provide those services in school, so whatever, you can't have therapy. But now I feel like because now it's covered under different insurances, I feel like it's more widely, like, people are keeping the services longer now, which is great. I feel like, honestly, without ABA, my son wouldn't be where he's at right now with the level of independence, if we're going to be honest. Because before then, it was like full-blown meltdowns, and it was often. It wasn't, over like the littlest thing. And then the thing is also paired with the fact that he wasn't speaking as much. I feel like the lack of communication, and also he didn't have like a device at the time to communicate or anything like that. So it's like pairing not being able to communicate plus the frustration level was like his tolerance was really low for certain things. It was just like World War II, like all the time. But I'm just like really, really grateful. Yeah. What were you gonna say? Sorry, Elizabeth.
No, I was just going to say, I see that all the time. It's such a big impact for not just the child, but the whole family.
Mm-hmm. And I feel like one of the biggest ones was like, we were in Dominican Republic visiting family, and we went to this church, and he wasn't able to tell me why he wanted to be in the church. However, he was scripting a lot, and they actually asked us to leave. And that was like one of the biggest meltdowns that I remember. He must have been like 4. He couldn't tell us why he wanted to be in there, but he was just like literally like screaming and crying and throwing himself on the floor. And the thing is, like, I feel like it's more, I know we let the, like, if you're in a private setting, it's easy to let the child cycle through and then have a conversation. But like when you're in public, it's so hard. So hard, because like everybody has an opinion. Everybody has an opinion, and they're like looking at your kid like, what's wrong with your child? But yeah. So I was gonna ask you. So Aiden did have feeding therapy when he was little. He was very aversive to a lot of different textures. And so I want to know, like, what made you interested specifically in that area, like the feeding part?
Yeah, and really, it was just out of necessity. After working across so many different settings, I noticed that all of the people that I worked with had some sort of eating issue. And some of those people had services that helped to address that, but others did not. And it was just every single person I came into contact with was either, food selective or had oral motor deficits, or maybe they had the opposite. They would eat everything. And that's also a problem, because you can't have a child eating food that's boiling hot and not understanding that sensation and then harming themselves. So many people that I came in contact with were just having all these different sorts of feeding issues. And so I kind of pursued training on my own to see how I could help my own clients a little bit better. So I just pursued some different training about feeding therapies, as well as like interdisciplinary approaches, particularly because we do have different scopes. So most of the time when you hear feeding therapy, you'll probably think of a speech therapist. They do the bulk, I think, of feeding therapy in terms of, they handle like oral motor deficits, sensory issues, as well as like communication around food, swallowing issues. A lot of things like that are typically going to be in the SLP's department, but also OTs can be really helpful if your child needs adaptations or has severe sensory needs as well. But from the BCBA's perspective, we also can contribute a lot to feeding therapy because it's all behavior. So a lot of kids need help with sitting calmly in their chair, using utensils correctly, being able to focus on one task when there's distractions in the environment, pacing their bites correctly, just all sorts of different behaviors that really do go into eating. And so this was really fascinating to me. And one thing that I consistently noticed was that there are some resources for kids with severe needs. There's tools that can diagnose swallowing issues, oral motor deficits, etc. There's pretty much nothing for kids that just need to increase their food variety. However, there's this vast population of kids that maybe don't have any, physical problems, but they are just so severely picky. And I wanted to develop something that could be helpful to practitioners in creating systematic goals for treating this, rather than just saying, what food should we start with? I don't know, how about eggs? But really having a way to track their progress, monitor how they're progressing with different textures, different shapes, different flavors, etc. And then as well as something that parents could just use if they wanted to better understand their child's eating habits.
I love that. And there's data. I love data. As a special education teacher, I'm obsessed with data. I'm like, I just want to I want to show exactly what's going on. And I feel like your tool does that so well. And the fact that it's a systematic approach, you're not just stabbing in the dark, what should we try today? And I feel like it's gonna, it's not only obviously BCBAs can use it, but I feel like other providers like speech therapists can use that as well. Aiden had feeding therapy via a speech teacher, and he was amazing. His name was Vikas Grover. He's actually in charge of the department. I can't remember what college exactly, but he's the head of the department of the speech department. I believe it might be Hunter or LaGuardia. I'm not sure, but he was phenomenal. And Aiden tried so many different foods. The thing is, parents are not sure where to start. I before he started getting therapy, I would just try things with him, and the reaction would be really over the top. So one time I gave him a lime at dinner, and we were in a restaurant. He started projectile vomiting everything. I was so embarrassed.
Excuse me, sorry. Having a tool like this, we talk about getting the low-hanging fruit first. Be successful with some foods before you start implementing some of those more difficult foods. So you can look and see okay, so this food is maybe in the 60 to 80% range. Let's start with this versus maybe there's a category of spicy foods. They have a score of 0. That's really a person. Let's not just throw spicy foods away first.
Yeah. I know it's always shocking because people don't know and then there was other things. I don't remember what it was, but there was something that literally made him gag, and he just kept gagging, and I was oh my God, what am I doing? But it would have been great to have some kind of assessment tool that would have been okay, so now this week we're going to try this, and then we need to do this many trials before we move on to a different category of food. Thank goodness that he's really into savory food. So he's anything savory, he's with it. But sweet stuff, now he's 15. Now he's a little bit more open to trying things that are sweet. The other day we went the day before yesterday, we went to brunch for my brother's birthday, and he tried a piece of a muffin, and I felt that was huge because he wouldn't. When he was little, he would have been no, thanks, and would not have tried it at all. So, yeah, we've gotten to the point that he's he trusts me that I'm not going to give him something gross. Because I feel a lot of the thing is the trust issue with kids, especially.
Absolutely. And sometimes they can be harmed from previous therapy, too, if they've been through a lot of different therapies. And maybe there's one food that's acquired really aversive properties because they were forced to eat it every single day or something like that. So definitely having trust is huge. Definitely having trust is huge.
Yeah, my friend, I had a friend, she's Dominican also, but one of our staples in our diet is avocado. And her mom used to force feed her avocado, and she's so aversive to it, she can't even see it on your plate. It's so bad. And she's an adult now. Yeah. So it's traumas around food are so easy to build. And then the thing is once they have the trauma, it's so hard to break that child out of there. So I'm sure you have obviously stories about that, but also tips on how to help parents get over that hurdle. But it's definitely something. I don't know, how would you start with a child once you do the feeding assessment and you figure out all the categories, like how do you start introducing the new foods to your client or your student that you're working with?
Yeah, definitely. So, like you mentioned, the first step would be doing the feeding assessment goal. I'll talk about what the results look like real quick, just so you have an idea. You're going to get a score across food groups. So fruits, vegetables, protein, dairy, grains, beans, treats, and snacks. Textures, soft and spongy, creamy, moist, crunchy, chewy, gritty, and dry. Shapes, flat, round, oblong, square, cube, unstructured, and unique. Flavors, sweet, salty, sour, spicy, tangy, bitter, savory, earthy, herbaceous, and bland. Colors, brown, tan, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, black, white, pink. And then the food temperatures, which is just like cold, cool, warm, hot. So then you can look at all your data, and either if you're a parent and you're trying to inform yourself, great. You can see what is in like the 60 to 80% range of foods maybe you want to start with. So for instance, if you see, there's some orange foods in their repertoire, they're kind of open to foods, and oblong foods, there's maybe a 60%. Okay, so let's start with carrot sticks. That's a great new food to try that you might be successful with. Versus, maybe they do really, really poorly with unstructured foods. They have a really low score. And whenever you present an unstructured food like pudding or soup or ice cream, anything like that, they gag or throw up. You don't want to start with that. That can come down the line. So I would recommend pursuing a food therapist, either an SLP, OT, or BCBA, based on your child's needs. Again, I talked about the scopes of practice before. So if your child has like severe sensory needs, maybe some medical needs, then you probably wouldn't do that through a BCBA. But if it's really more behavioral and just a lot of food refusal, then a BCBA might be able to help you. And then, yeah, you can look at those results together and come up with some systematic goals as far as maybe you want to increase food groups to at least 5 foods per food group, or eat at least 4 different textures, or whatever the systematic goal is. And then from there, there's a lot of different strategies that we can try. And one of them is simultaneous presentation, which is basically pairing a preferred food with not necessarily a non-preferred food, but something that they're not as comfortable with. So if we go back to the carrot sticks, maybe they really like cream cheese. Serving the carrot sticks with cream cheese. Obviously, that would be an example of a simultaneous presentation where the carrot sticks will then start to acquire those more reinforcing properties.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like so Aiden is very much like a verbal one too. Like if I told him that something is like pizza, he's more willing to try it as opposed to me just telling him, hey, this is a quesadilla, try it, and he's gonna say no. So usually because pizza is a preferred food, I'll say like it's like pizza because it has cheese on the inside as opposed to on top. And like verbally describing it to him and then having him look at it. He's a very big smeller of food. Like and I feel like this, I don't know if this is just a neurodiverse thing, but like my aunt is a smeller too. It's like, but she's not on the spectrum. But she's like she smells all her food before she eats it. So I'm used to that behavior. So he'll smell it, he'll touch it, and then like he'll have like a little teeny piece. I'll let him like process that, but then I won't present him like if I'm trying quesadillas that day, I won't give him like a full quesadilla and not give him like on his plate like rice and chicken, which he loves. So I always pair it with a preferred food that he loves. That way it's like simultaneously presented, even though it's like on the same plate, but I won't let it touch or anything like that so that he can distinguish it. But then, I feel like I've had more success that way. But I love that approach that you're saying, like the simultaneous presentation, like dipping the carrot in the cream cheese because they like cream cheese.
Right. And that's obviously not something that you want to like sustain forever. It's not like you want them to only be able to eat carrots with cream cheese. But eventually then as they become more comfortable with the carrot, you can fade away whatever food is simultaneous.
I remember when I was a kid, my mom introduced us to we didn't really eat a lot of broccoli, but then like she figured out how to do it with like the cheese sauce on top. I don't think it was I don't forget the name of the sauce. It was like really, I'm sure it's really bad for you. But she presented it to us with the cheese on top. But now I'm like a fan of broccoli, obviously. But yeah, no, definitely. I feel like it makes it less terrible. It makes it less terrible when it's paired with something that you love.
One fact that a lot of people don't realize is when we're younger, we actually have more taste buds. So you're not like just pickier when you're younger, you can just taste foods better. So when we say like certain foods have an acquired taste, like broccoli, actually just because we've lost enough taste buds to like it.
That cracks me up. Also, like, because like it's a I feel like broccoli is not something that we get so much in the Caribbean, at least in Dominican Republic. We used to, my aunt would cook broccoli here, my dad's aunt, and she would always overcook the broccoli. So it was like, it wasn't appealing. It was like a brownish kind of, she would overcook it to the point that it was like really mushy, and like the color was like off, and it smelled really bad. So I can just imagine our kids, like, you know, getting presented with something like that and being like, eat it, it's good. They're like, no thanks.
Right, yeah.
But that was like actually, when I first started teaching, that was like my favorite time. I would go down to the cafeteria and watch the kids eat, and they would have therapy sessions with their OT and the PT and the ABA therapist during lunchtime. So, you know, they would work on different skills. Like one of the kids was working on learning how to cut the foods in like appropriate size so that they wouldn't like take a huge piece in their mouth. So I feel like there's, when you break down the art of eating, there's so many different skills that the kids need to work on, and it's such a integral part of who we are as people. Like, we need to learn these skills, so might as well pair it with something like a preferred activity like eating, and then I feel like it's something that they can apply later on to their other lives, because it doesn't just live when you're eating. It goes into other aspects, like being adventurous goes into other aspects of our lives, not just with food.
Absolutely. You need to be able to, absolutely. You need to be able to eat, to go to social gatherings that have food present, or, you know, to engage in eating at the office if, you know, someone is going to get a job. So it's so relevant to all aspects of life. And kind of related to what you said regarding therapy in the school setting, that was one thing that really sparked my interest in this as well. When I was a special education teacher and working in an interdisciplinary team, we had a couple siblings who had some feeding problems, and there was a lot of back and forth between the team and the parents. The parents and advocate felt really strongly that they needed feeding therapy in school, and the school wasn't sure that it was something that needed to be provided. And because there was not a tool like this to really quantify and say, yes, you have a really crucial here, they ended up not getting those services. And so I was kind of like, man, if there was just something that could like justify that, or you know, give us an explanation of these eating habits rather than just like the say, I guess, maybe that would help the parents access.
I love that. So I when in the email that you sent me, I love the piece where you said that the parents can use a tool to advocate for their kids. Like, can you talk a little bit more about how that works, with especially during IEP meetings? Like, how can these parents use this as a tool to help them advocate for more services, or like for more specific services for their children?
Yeah, so feeding therapy is on the rise. There have been some approaches that have been around for a long time, but it's drastically growing because autism is growing so much. And so I think that's something that we're going to see a lot more coming up in IEPs and legislation and all of that sort of thing. Like I mentioned in my previous experience, I saw families who did not get feeding services in the school because the school basically deemed they weren't necessary. But that was all subjective. There was no way to say whether they really were or they weren't. So having a tool like this, let's say you're a parent and you're in an IEP and you're like, I really think the OT needs to work on this with my child in the lunchroom. And the school says no. Well, we have a tool that can actually say whether this is necessary or not, or just how severe the deficit is. Because it is true that, you know, you can't work on everything in school. And so if the child is just mildly food selective, maybe not very much more food selective than the typical population, or, you know, they have no other deficits in that area, okay, then maybe not. Maybe you don't need services in the lunchroom. But if you can actually show no, my child's really food selective. They have a very low score. We include other things besides just the food selectivity on this instrument. So there's also eating related communication, physical and motor capabilities, and social eating behaviors. So things like being able to change the routine if there's an assembly or a holiday or things like that. So if you can show like they're not able to do any of these things, well, then now you have a lot more of an argument as to why you need services.
I love that. And this is so timely because literally Thanksgiving is like 2 days away.
I know.
One of the autism accounts that I follow, her name's LaQuista Arena. She's a doctor in behavioral therapy, but also she has a son that's on the spectrum. Well, not a doctor in behavioral therapy. She's a like a clinical psychologist. So LaQuista, she posted the other day, you might be a special needs parent if like you're bringing food to the Thanksgiving dinner because your child only eats certain foods. So like, I feel like a lot of parents related to that so much because, sometimes as special needs parents, our Thanksgivings don't look like everybody else's Thanksgiving. And also like, I feel like I love the fact that we're talking about this today because not only that, but then like, when you're around other family members, they need to know also like what is and is not okay to do when your child is aversive to food. Like, especially speaking from the lens of like Black and brown communities, a lot of our parents used to be, at least for me, when I was a kid, it was like, oh, you don't eat this, then you're not going to eat at all, right? So it was like I had to eat things that I didn't like. And I feel that because we're special needs parents and also we're breaking like traumas and stigmas and stuff like that, we're more receptive to what our children need and we're able to accommodate them in a better way. But like, can we talk about a little bit like maybe helping parents broach the topic of food sensitivities to family members? Like, have you ever facilitated those conversations or like coached a parent on how to bring it up to their family members?
Yeah, that's so hard. And I think handling any behavior with other family members is just so difficult because they're not going to understand it the same way you would and all the intricacies of it and maybe all the precursor behaviors to a tantrum or what are some antecedents that might lead to a huge meltdown or whatever it is. And so it's really, really hard to express all of that information in a way that doesn't make you sound like you're being over the top or, that might incur judgment on you or your child. So that's definitely really difficult. I think holidays are a huge, huge struggle for a lot of families with kids who have disabilities because of the eating different foods, the overstimulation. Maybe we're eating at a different time. Maybe we're eating with completely unfamiliar forks and plates. That's not, we're not used to those. So there's just so much that goes into it. I think it's always best to have a conversation beforehand with whoever it is, your parents or your sister or whatever, where the child is not around, where you can talk through some of those things, because the same rules do not always apply to neurotypical children. And so one thing that I know people always say is like, if they're hungry enough, they'll eat. And that's not the case. Like research definitely shows us you can be hungry and not eat, especially with children who gag or vomit when food is presented. So kind of having that understanding established that, you just want them to have a good time because it's their holiday too. They're going to eat a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Please don't comment on that. We're going to eat turkey like normal or whatever it is. Kind of just establishing what you want to happen beforehand and having that honest conversation when the child is not present or having a meltdown at that time.
Yeah. Another thing is like sometimes your kid's is not going to join the dinner table. They might come for grace and then they'll eat and then or they'll take their plate and sit like close proximity, but they won't sit at the dinner table. And that's also okay. I feel like as parents and like family members of people with special needs, like we need to pick our battles. Like as long as they're eating, I feel like the location really doesn't matter. I feel like whatever they feel comfortable with, especially, and like, do you want to have the child having a meltdown or do you prefer like for Thanksgiving to look the certain way that you want it to look? Like you have to decide as a family what's more important to you. And I feel like long term, the child will eventually start joining the dinner table, at least for Aiden, it used to be like kind of like 5 minutes here, and then like he'd just go do his own thing somewhere else because he didn't want to be around so many people at the same time. So like now it's to the point that he will eat with us. He'll sit through dinner, but he won't like linger. He won't stay and like have like those long-winded conversations with us, and he won't like want to watch football after. So like he'll have his dinner, he'll clean up after himself, and then he'll go do his own thing, and I'm okay with that. And I feel like I've taught my family to simultaneously be okay with that also. I feel like breaking away from those I feel like trauma-informed practices a little bit. Like, no, this is what needs to happen, and that's how it's gonna happen, and it's too bad for you. Moving away from that with my family has been like a big battle, but now it's more inclusive in the sense that, hey, he might not eat these things. However, we are seeing the positive that he is spending more time with us, and he is tolerating more time away from like his preferred activities to, you know, have dinner or whatever the case may be that day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you feel like your family has kind of like grown to be more comfortable and understanding of all those differences?
Yeah, they definitely have. It took a while to like break away from like kind of like they have to do this. I feel like now it's more they value Aiden's comfort over anything, even though like I feel I do put some more, I do put demands on him, and they're like, oh, just leave him alone. I'm like, no, he needs to learn this thing, you know, and I feel like taking the parents' lead, because also I've seen as a teacher where parents don't put any demands on their children, and the child is not able to adapt to different environments. So there has to be with everything, there needs to be a balance. But I feel like this is important too, like deciding what things are really important and what you're going to work on, and thinking about that beforehand, not like, I guess, on the spot, you know. Also, there's things that you can't pre-plan either. Like there's things that are going to come up that you're just going to have to deal with on the spot and make a decision, an executive decision.
Yeah, and it's like you said, you're the parent, so you're the one that decides what the order of priorities are, and it kind of goes into like, you know, what's the culture and like the setup of your family. Is it really important that everyone sits at the table, or is it acceptable that some people sit at the counter and we're all just kind of eating around and savoring together? So it's kind of just based on, you know, the norms of that situation.
Yeah. Another thing my son loves, he loves eating in bowls. So I have to like game plan, like, okay, Aiden, you know, Thanksgiving we eat on plates, and he's like, oh no. I'm like, yeah, we're gonna eat on a plate, and it's okay, it's still the same food. And he's like, okay.
That's another thing that I always tell parents, like when they're starting young, you know, with feeding at age 3 or something like that, like give them as many different bowls and plates and cups and spoons, so they're not ever like, I really like my red bowl today. Just give them a variety.
I mean, he's okay with any bowl. The thing is, like, it has to be in a bowl. But like, I've gotten him to the point that he knows that when we go to restaurants, the food is not going to be in a bowl, and that's okay. And when we go to a restaurant, he cannot eat with a spoon because there's going to be forks and knives, and he can use the fork and knife to like poke the food and eat it. But yeah, it took a while, because like I remember when we first started going to restaurants, after he started like getting that preference of like eating with a bowl and a spoon, he'd be like, put the food in a bowl. I'm like, we can't. There's no bowls here. You have to eat on the plate. And then he would like eventually eat.
But that's really generalized to the setting.
Yeah. Like but he knows that in restaurants for sure that there are no bowls. And then like for special occasions like Thanksgiving, Christmas, Nochebuena, he's gonna eat on a plate, and that's okay. It's still the same food. But he does like, and I also don't do the whole like you have to finish everything on your plate before you get up. No, if he's not hungry, he's not going to eat. I know my son, like I know when he's hungry, he's going to devour everything. But if he's like, just so happens that he doesn't want any more, like I'm not going to sit him down and like have him finish the plate because that's what we used to do. No, that's like, you know.
And that might be one of the reasons why he's made such great progress. Haven't forced him into these things, and you are letting him just kind of listen to his own body and that kind of stuff. So that's great that he's probably not acquiring those food traumas that other people might have.
Yeah, no. And then another thing my mom used to do a lot when we were kids was like, if we like the food, she would just make it all the time. So I know he likes certain things, but I don't make it all the time. Like it's like, oh, I made it today, yay! And then some days I don't make it, and that's okay also. Because I feel like, you know, especially like my little brother, what was it he used to be obsessed with? Yellow plantains. He would like, she would make them all the time for dinner. And it got to a point that she made it so much that I am not a fan of yellow plantains anymore. Like I could see them on my plate or not, and I'm good. Like I usually don't go for them. But yeah, no, I don't do that overfeeding of the preferred food either, because I know that there's like a saturation level, and once they get there, it's hard to bring them back to that. Satiation, sorry. Yeah. So Aiden, I remember at one point before he got more foods in his repertoire, it was like a lot of yogurt, and he does not like yogurt anymore. It was like a lot of yogurt, a lot of what is it? He used to call leche with the milk, like with like the strawberry syrup. He doesn't drink milk anymore, and he doesn't like yogurt either, because it was like such a thing. Like he said, that was like the only thing he was eating at one point. I think when he was like 2 to 3 years old, and now he doesn't like milk at all.
Right. We always encourage people, like, if you're going to have a feeding treatment plan, you need to have multiple foods on that plan. You can't be successful with one food, and now it's like we're having mashed potatoes every single day or whatever it is, because they'll get satiated, and now that food is out too. So it's always like you have to present, multiple foods, and at least like once a week represent that food so that they can actually start to have some real variety.
That's interesting. You know what? One thing you did say that like on the food feeding assessment tool that like kind of like rang the bell, and I was like, oh, I'll talk about this later. But the colors is like a big thing. I didn't know it was such a big thing in other kids, but the colors and then the shape of the food, I didn't know that was a thing. I was like, oh my god! Like I interviewed another autism mom on the show. Her son's 17, and he only eats bland, crunchy, like cream colored food. So I'm like, okay, so he only eats like crackers or whatever it is. And then she's like, yeah. And I'm just like, but he doesn't eat like rice. He won't eat. But I'm sure it's a texture thing, because like the rice itself, when it goes in your mouth, it has a different texture, and then you have to chew it to get it to like the consistency that you want. But I was just like, oh my god! I was like, does he eat like kong, like the so that we eat the sticky part of the rice on the bottom of the pot, and Aiden loves it. He calls it crunchy rice. But I was like, does he eat that? She's like, absolutely not. He would never. I was like, oh my god! But like, I'm so grateful that Aiden has done such that I've worked with him with the feeding, and he's able to be more adventurous now. But I feel for the parents that the kids only eat like chicken nuggets all the time, or like French fries, and it's only a certain brand. I interviewed
that's always what it is.
Yeah, I interviewed an author. She's on the spectrum herself, and her children are on the spectrum too. So one of the sons is nonverbal. So they do a French fry day where it's a French fry off. So dad makes a certain fry, brother makes a certain fry, she makes a certain fry, and then he has to decide which one is his favorite. And then also he, like, all the French fries that he eats are like a certain brand, and it has to be a certain cut. He won't have a steak fry. He won't have curly fries. It's just that one French fry brand. Yeah. So it's really interesting. I feel like feeding, just like in general, like aversions to food, or like, I feel like that's one of my favorite things to explore with children. Especially hearing from therapists such as yourself about the different nuances and the different preferences of food that the children have.
For sure. And yeah, the brand switching is like one of the steps I hear a lot. That like they will only have this certain type of whatever, and they know the difference. Like when you present a different one, they know it like that.
And you'll even put it in the same bag of the thing that they like, and they'll know. They'll be like, no, not the same. They won't eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I recommend people start with is just presenting the exact same food, unchanged, except presented differently, so like upside down. Like if they eat Pop-Tarts, just present it upside down. And then, you can slowly build more to that. So you just cut it in half once, or you cut it in thirds. So it's the same food, but you're just starting to present it a little bit differently.
Oh my God, you just blew my mind. I never thought of that. It's so funny. Yeah, like, cause like they'll definitely like stop you if it doesn't look a certain way, they won't eat it. So I that's so cool. Like to build up the tolerance of like changing foods around. That's so interesting. And Aiden calls everything chicken,
Definitely.
but he eats different types of proteins. Like he'll have pork and beef and all that, but he calls everything chicken. And if I call it by its actual name, he will not eat it. He'll be like, no thanks.
That's actually one of the questions is will they eat foods when called by their real name?
No, he'll Aiden, would you like some beef? No, thanks. I was like, do you want chicken? Yes. But he qualifies it by color. So he knows like the different color ones. He was like, like he'll go to the babysitter, not the babysitter, the person that takes care of him. And I'll be like, so what kind of food did you have at grandpa or at grandma's house? And he'll be like, I had brown rice with beans inside and brown chicken. I was like, so you had beef? He's like, no, brown chicken. I'm like, it's beef.
Oh, okay.
I feel like he listens, but he's like, I'm just gonna call it whatever I want to call it. Sure, mom, yeah, beef, whatever. But when he was little, definitely like presenting it with the actual name of the food, he would like not. He wouldn't try it. He's like, what is this now? Like, no.
This foreign thing.
Oh my God, I love it. So what besides like simultaneous presentation, what other tips can we give parents at least for Thanksgiving, which is hopefully I'll get this episode out by tomorrow morning, so that we can share tips with parents. Like what other things can they do for Thanksgiving or maybe I don't know, maybe not presenting new food on Thanksgiving. I don't know. What do your advice be? Huh?
Yeah, when it comes to like holidays, you want them to enjoy themselves. You want them to spend time with family, relax, etc. You don't want to be dealing with a tantrum or something because you presented a brand new food. So I would recommend if the holidays come up and they love chicken nuggets, that's okay. Give them chicken nuggets. Like it doesn't really matter that much. Let them enjoy their day. But if you really do feel like your child has a feeding deficit, then seek out feeding therapy. And a therapist can help you with individualizing your needs to help. There are a few other strategies off the top of my head. One of them is behavioral momentum, which is basically asking them to do something easy before you present something harder. So that could be taking a bite from a spoon there's no food on it, just like an air bite, and then putting a teeny bite on there. So that way they feel successful. You can give them lots of praise. You kind of just like build up until present that more difficult task, and they're feeling a little bit more confident and ready to engage. Also, allowing for choice is sometimes a good idea. So, presenting a couple different options and saying, which one of these would you like? Not an open choice of like, hey, what can I make you for dinner? Because that can be problematic. But a this or that choice sometimes helps them feel a little bit more in control.
Yeah. One thing that I was going to point out was that I feel like my siblings also, like my mom would always like on holidays, like she has like these great recipes that she would like use all the time. But then like on holidays, she would want to like invent and like put like things in the food that is not like typical. And then they would like be disappointed in the food. So I feel like try your experimentation outside of a holiday setting. Just in general, not just for like our neurodiverse babies, but like everybody. Like I feel like Thanksgiving, like you said, is a time for. I feel like the priority should be spending time with family. Building those habits of like, loving on each other. As opposed to like force feeding your kids like mashed potatoes if they hate like mushy stuff. So definitely thinking about. And if you want to try a new recipe, definitely do not do it on Thursday, please. But it was
Thanksgiving's not the time.
Yeah, or Christmas. Like, don't.
No.
So, oh my God, Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming on the show. I feel like this is like one of those topics that once you start talking, you can't stop yourself from sharing. But
Yeah.
thank you so much for coming on the show and for creating this amazing assessment tool. I'm definitely going to be linking the tool in the show notes, so the parents can take a look at it, and then they can provide it to, like, the link to their providers so that they can get access to it as well. So do you have any social handles that you would like to drop for people to follow you?
I don't have any professional social media, and our website is just feedingassessmenttool.com. You can reach out to me via email at contact@feedingassessmenttool.com. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for having me on this. I really appreciate you talk about this. Obviously, I'm very passionate about it.
Awesome. Comadres, you know that if you have any questions at all for me or Elizabeth, please feel free to send me a Comadre-Gram via email at Marcy@comadreandopod.com or slide up into my DMs. Also, please visit our website, www.comadreandopod.com, to read our latest blog posts, find out about future events, and get your official Comadre merch. Thank you for spending time with your comadres. You're officially a comadre of the show. Elizabeth, welcome to the fold. And I would just want to thank everybody and wish you a very restful, loving, relaxing Thanksgiving, everyone. Take care. Bye.
Hello, comadre. Hey, comadre. Do you have a minute for comadre time?